This message comes from Homes.com. What kind of programs does this school have? How are the test scores? These are all things parents ask when they home shop. That's why each listing on Homes.com includes extensive reports on local schools. Homes.com. We've done your homework.
A warning. This segment contains references to sex and sexuality. Hello, hello. I'm Brittany Luce, and you're listening to It's Been a Minute from NPR, a show about what's going on in culture and why it doesn't happen by accident. You know the phrase that you don't want to yuck someone's yum? If you start with Orlock at a yuck, by the end, you're like, I see what Ellen is getting into with this.
Speak for yourself, but okay.
It is the last week of Oscar season, and instead of talking about the glitz and the glamour, I want to get nasty, but not in the way you may be thinking. My producer, Alexis,
Hey.
noticed that some of our favorite films from the past year have been portraits of women battling with what disgusts them most: themselves, their insecurities, their desires, their yearning, and how those feelings manifest in a society that's often hostile to women. Think about it. The Substance, Nosferatu, even Babygirl, all feature women dealing with some type of self-loathing made real, whether that's through a literal monster or an affair with a younger coworker. But I wanted to dig deeper, so I called up Pop Culture Happy Hour's Aisha Harris to help.
Hi.
Aisha, Alexis, and I are getting into how women's desire, repression, and disgust have made the monsters that appear on screen all too real. And for those who haven't seen these films, there are some light spoilers ahead, but don't worry, we won't ruin the whole movie. First up, The Substance. This Oscar-nominated film stars Demi Moore as Elizabeth, a fading celebrity who, on her 50th birthday, is fired from her job as a TV aerobics instructor. Then she's told about the substance, a drug that can make her young, hot, and most importantly, lovable again. She takes it and Sue appears, played by Margaret Qualley. Sue is successful, beautiful, and gets Elizabeth's old job back. But the thing about the substance is you have to respect the balance. And Elizabeth can only live as Sue for 7 days. Then Elizabeth must return to her old self. And that starts a vicious, very gory cycle that snowballs into one of the most gruesome body horror experiences that I've ever seen. Aisha, when you think about this film in terms of women's relationship to the grotesque, or even women's bodies' relationships to the grotesque, what catches your attention?
I mean, this idea of body horror and the grotesque and making the internal external is definitely not something that's new in any way. You know, obviously there's been things like Rosemary's Baby, Carrie, The Fly, Jennifer's Body. Like, we've seen this happen before, but I think what it makes this really interesting is that it is about an internal character study of what men and misogyny and all the terrible external things do to a person on the inside, and it's about the effects of how that takes hold within yourself. It feels like such a apt time for this to come out, not just, you know, in an era where we are constantly fighting over what we can do with our bodies, but also just how Instagram and social media really encourages young women and young people generally to want to look a certain type of way, to think that in order to have value, you have to look like a Kardashian, or you have to look 20 years younger than you actually are. This movie takes all of that and then puts it into like the most disgusting, gross package you could possibly imagine. Like, I've seen a lot of horror movies. I can do gruesome.
Yeah.
This tested my limits in so many ways.
But Alexis, I'd love to hear from you on this.
So with The Substance, there's like one scene that really stands out to me in the film, and it has absolutely no dialogue. But I think a lot of people can resonate with it. It's actually in the trailer. So she's preparing to go on this date.
So listen, I was thinking that maybe we could get together and grab a drink.
And every time she looks in the mirror, she just sees something else about herself that she just doesn't like.
Yes. So good.
She tries different lipsticks. She tries different hairstyles. And she just keeps trying to change things about herself. She keeps thinking like, this isn't working. This isn't enough. I'm not enough. And that cycle gets so bad that she not only misses the date, but she ends up like binge eating in the middle of the night. She looks a mess. She stressed herself out to the point where she's essentially punishing herself. Mm-hmm. It just felt a little bit too familiar for me. And it just hurt to watch.
Yeah.
But I think it was a really integral scene to seeing how someone's self-loathing or self-hatred can manifest, especially in quiet moments.
That scene in particular came up in one of those actress roundtables. Zendaya was there, Mikey Madison was there, obviously Demi Moore, Angelina Jolie. And at this roundtable, they're discussing the film, and someone brought up that scene.
The going out scene?
Yes.
Oh, my Lord, Demi.
It was such an intimate and just raw, transparent, portrayal of what we can do to ourselves.
And I mean, I've just named extremely beautiful, extremely conventionally beautiful Hollywood actresses. They all also felt just as deeply touched by that scene as I was. These are all women that I think many people imagine, oh, if I looked like her, I would never feel this way again. And it doesn't work like that.
Yeah. Well, that's the rub, right? And that goes to show just how depressing it is because, when you think of someone like Demi Moore, she's older than that character.
She's 62.
She's 62, right. So she's older, and yet she looks like that. And obviously this was like a very deliberate, I think, casting choice. Farjah has talked about how she wanted to emphasize that even people who look like Demi Moore, who look younger than they are and actually are in some ways giving unrealistic beauty standards to people because it's like, am I expected to look like Halle Berry when I'm her age? I don't have the trainer.
I don't got the nutritionist.
I don't look like Halle Berry today.
I don't.
Yeah. So it's a cruel irony, but I also understand why that point needs to be made.
The substance was really interesting to me because it is so meta, as you brought up, Aisha. Demi Moore is this gorgeous 62-year-old Hollywood A-lister, ruled the 80s, ruled the 90s, part of the Brat Pack, and she was considered this huge sex symbol. And I kind of wonder, if Demi Moore wasn't someone who's still considered to be beautiful, desirable, aspirational, would she be so rewarded for this performance where she is uglying herself? I wonder if there are some viewers, perhaps some Academy voters even, who find safety in the idea that the grotesque image of Demi Moore we're seeing on screen, it's exploring ugliness, but a very contained ugliness that doesn't need to be engaged with in real life.
Mm. I mean, if we're talking about Oscars, the Academy loves a huge performance. I think also just generally speaking, audiences love a huge performance that feels like a stretch or like a transformation. So obviously, Brendan Fraser, The Whale, it's a different sort of thing. But I do think that the embrace of it comes from a similar place.
And to just put the final pin in there, Elizabeth and Sue interact with each other as if they're separate beings. Sue is the younger, vivacious, more successful one who is frustrated by Elizabeth's self-loathing. And Elizabeth is the older one who is jealous and resentful of Sue's youth and success. And, she's essentially living the life that she used to have. But the whole movie reminds us that they are the same person. So, for instance, when Elizabeth is spiraling and eventually starts binge eating to cope, Sue also bears the brunt of that when she is awake and doing her thing.
Yes.
This balance is not working. I barely have any time to enjoy myself, while she wastes 7 days stuffing her face in front of the TV.
Remember, there is no she, and you are.
So what we're watching is not two people at odds with each other. Instead, you're watching a woman exact the violence of beauty standards, aging, desirability upon herself. We're watching her hurt herself.
So moving on to another film, Nosferatu, which ended up being actually one of my favorite movies of 2024. It was directed by Robert Eggers, and Nosferatu takes place in the early 1800s in Germany, and it follows a character named Ellen, who's played by Lily Rose Depp. And Ellen is a very lonely and sad young woman, and she's looking for connection, someone to help her feel less alone.
Anything. Hear my call. Come to me.
And that's how she forms this psychic connection to Count Orlok, who is this evil vampire who also is like, I don't know, it feels like 7 feet tall, bald, looks like a rotting corpse.
Well, also, Eggers apparently said that Skarsgård actually had, like, live maggots on him.
Oh, no.
So, like, yeah.
No. And so Orlok wants Ellen all to himself, and he basically possesses her with these psychosexual seizures and fits. This is all happening until Ellen meets the guy who becomes her husband, named Thomas. So Orlok is obviously jealous when this happens and wreaks havoc upon their community. He's basically a plague unto himself, just taking everybody out. And Ellen basically has to figure out how she can leverage her connection to Orlok in order to save her town. So, Alexis, I'd love to hear from you on this. What about this film and the way it gets into Ellen's relationship to the grotesque jumped out for you?
So Nosferatu lives within the Gothic horror canon. And according to the New York Public Library, Gothic horror has these heavy discussions of morality, philosophy, religion, things of that nature. And the villains in these stories are often metaphors for some type of temptation the hero has to overcome.
The other interesting facet of this is, like, there's also a plague happening. There's rats everywhere. So that's connected to Orlok. It's like his aura, his presence brings that in.
Right. Orlok sort of embodies the other, more specifically something like otherworldly or foreign. And this is important because Ellen is someone who is very sensitive to that and sympathetic to this idea of the other, because she does have like these, you know, interesting, weird psychic abilities. But that also alienates her from her community, from her friends, her family, and her husband. And the interesting tension in the movie is that as awful as Orlok is and terrible as he treats her, she does admit that for a time she enjoyed the relationship she and Orlok had because he fulfilled some inexplicable desire in her that was hard to square with, like, polite society.
The other facet of this is, like, she is married. She has a husband. He's clearly not satisfying her in the way that she would like to be satisfied. He is not Orlok. And so...
No.
That's the truth.
So there's like a very, very graphic scene between her and her husband, Thomas, played by Nicholas Hoult, that makes it clear that, yes, it's the two of them, but like Orlok's spirit is really what's driving this like eroticism. It's like as if she's fantasizing being with Orlok while she's with her husband. And it comes out and like, I mean, look, I'm not going to knock anyone's whatever they go for, but like, it's not what I think most people would consider to be sexy. It's gross, it's grotesque, but it satisfies her to a point.
I feel like in a lot of horror films, the heroine has to reject her monster or her own desires or overpower them or overcome them in order to triumph. But I thought it was interesting that in this film, Ellen has to become one with her monster in order to not just free herself from torment, but to save her town. Like when Orlok arrives in their city with this plague, it's not just rats, it's disease. People are getting sick and dying or being tormented in their dreams like Ellen. And Orlok eventually tells her that if she does not return to him, he will kill, you know, the people in her life that she loves. So, I mean, you know, Ellen's got some big decisions to make. And honestly, she had a lot more agency in those decisions than I was expecting.
Yes.
I mean, one of the things that has been, I'll say kind of confounding, but kind of not to me, are seeing these thirst edits of Count Orlok. Even though we are definitely meant to find Orlok disgusting, we also find him compelling and appealing. Like, you know the phrase that you don't want to yuck someone's yum? If you start with Orlok at a yuck, by the end, you're like, I see what Ellen is getting into with this.
Speak for yourself, but okay.
Listen, you begin to see why she may not turn away.
It's a tale as old as time. whenever you're reading or watching something that was born out of a repressive time, Dracula, the Stoker version, the book came out of the Victorian era. So like whenever you're reading those things, it's often focusing on how women are being ignored or their needs and desires are being ignored. So it's a little feminist in a way, or at least it's like treading in those waters.
I do think the reason why some people may have slightly turned toward Orlok by the end is because throughout the film, you know, Alan was really trying to connect with people and be like, hey, do y'all ever just feel very sad? And they're just like, no.
No, girl.
So, you know, when you have no other person to confide in or at the very least feel seen by, it's not surprising that you end up finding unexpected or even grotesque places for comfort. As awful and murderous and terrible as he is, she cannot deny that indulging in him, it's a yearning that she can't seem to shake because she does feel so alone.
Coming up, a film that's a bit more grounded in this world than the underworld, but just as fun.
I guess the most grotesque this movie gets is like stuff that suggests dogs and milk and it's like, but again, if you're into that, there's no shame here.
All that and more when we get back.
This message comes from Schwab. At Schwab, how you invest is your choice, not theirs. That's why when it comes to managing your wealth, Schwab gives you more choices. You can invest and trade on your own. Plus, get advice and more comprehensive wealth solutions to help meet your unique needs. With award-winning service, low costs, and transparent advice, you can manage your wealth your way at Schwab. Visit schwab.com to learn more. This message comes from NPR sponsor 1Password. Protect your digital life with 1Password. If you're tired of family members constantly texting you for the passwords to streaming services, 1Password lets you securely share or remove access to logins. Access from any device, anytime. 1Password lets you securely switch between iPhone, Android, Mac, and PC with convenient features like autofill for quick sign-ins. Right now, get a free 2-week trial for you and your family at 1password.com/NPR.
This message comes from Grainger. As a maintenance specialist for a historic high-rise, you know that vintage charm historically needs constant attention, which is why when it's time to upgrade turn-of-the-century mechanicals, they turn to Grainger. With easy access to 1 million-plus products and the scale to deliver when and where you need them, the right tools and supplies are never far away, so you can keep that vintage building running like new. Call, click Grainger.com, or just stop by. Grainger, for the ones who get it done.
Well, I want to talk about the final film in this trio. It's a little bit more grounded in reality. There's no substance to speak of. There's no balance to keep with 7 days here and 7 days there. There's no vampires in this movie. But I think it drives home a lot of what we see in The Substance and Nosferatu. It's a little movie called Babygirl.
If we're going to do this, we need to set some rules that you and I both agree on.
Did you order this?
Starting with, I tell you what to do and you do it.
Directed by Helena Rain. Aisha, could you give us a quick rundown of the film?
Well, have you seen a Nicole Kidman movie or TV show in the last, decade? Basically, she plays, this high-powered CEO of a company. A new intern strikes her fancy. She finds him interesting. He's played by Harris Dickinson. And they start an affair. Mm-hmm. Now, a crucial point to make here is that her husband is Antonio Banderas, who... Talk about people who are in their, later years and still looking fine as wine.
Agreed.
But again, similar to Nosferatu, he's not doing it for her. And she wants things that he cannot give her in the bedroom. And so she finds it in the Harris Dickinson character. It's not really grotesque, I think, but this movie is about shame in many ways and how that manifests and how it leads her to do something unethical.
It isn't grotesque in the same way as Lily Rose Depp, convulsing with her eyes rolling back in her head. But the way that Nicole Kidman's character Romy treats herself is she might as well be Demi Moore's character from The Substance. She might as well be Ellen from Nosferatu. She is so ashamed and disgusted with herself for simply wanting something sexually, yes, but also I think even emotionally, romantically, than like the course that's been laid out for her. When she's not at work, she is going to therapy. She is cold plunging. She is getting Botox. She is cooking breakfast in her work clothes, already with a full face of makeup on and an apron for her children and husband in the morning before the kids go to school. Even though, mind you, checking their backpacks, her children are teenagers in this movie, okay? Clearly, I get the sense that her husband does not out-earn her also in this movie.
Yeah, he's like a theater director or something. I mean, an accomplished one, but still, like...
But still, not that same... She's like big tech money, right?
Yeah. There's a moment actually with one of her children where they're taking a family photo, like a family holiday photo. And one of her children, like, chides her for having Botox or something.
Yeah.
And it's like, oh my God, so cutting. I could hear that conversation happening in real life. Like, Mom, why do you do this? Like, embrace your body. And it's like, okay, but honey, this is the world we live in does not want me to do that.
One thing that stood out to me was a scene where Romy and Samuel are intimate for the first time.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And there's such a clear disgust that Romy has with the fact that she is enjoying herself. Outside of even just like the ethical part where it's like, I definitely should not be doing this. Separate from that is like her internal struggle with like having a very much pleasure-centered experience that is all about her. And I feel like it wasn't until I saw that scene that I realized like, oh, she's like very deeply ashamed that she wants to be satisfied.
You make a really good point, Alexis, about her just, it's like she's not able to enjoy herself, partially because of this very specific shame that she has around her desires. It felt like she was both having her own very specific journey, but also very tapped into something that I think a lot of people feel when they are pulled in a lot of different directions between work, family, and marriage. Like there was not really any room left for herself. And the room she took for herself, she was trying to better herself or do something to make herself better as opposed to make herself happy. What I did enjoy about this film is that the ending did not go full Fatal Attraction.
No.
But I feel like usually in movies where women do something like have an affair, the women are severely punished. I think about that movie Unfaithful with Diane Lane and Richard Gere. Tyler Perry's Temptation.
Tyler Perry's everything.
Tyler Perry's everything. So I mean, without spoiling the movie, I think that Nicole Kidman's character Romy faces consequences, but she also experiences a catharsis. I feel like the movie kind of shows her having grown and learned from the experience of having an affair.
Yeah.
I don't know. It was nice to see a woman embracing pleasure in her life.
I think it's interesting to have these moments in movie going where you have these like internal anxieties, shame, desires, whatever, being made very, very explicit. I think a lot of people will find and have found comfort in these things. I mean, as disturbing as especially Nosferatu and The Substance are, there's still something like, I think just seeing yourself in it is comforting in a way. There's always going to be a time where, especially when the world kind of feels like we're in peril, where these types of stories will feel especially relevant.
Alexis, Aisha, thank you both so much for joining me today. I really had fun getting into the nasty bits with you both.
Thanks for having me, Brittany.
Thank you.
That was iBand producer Alexis Williams and Pop Culture Happy Hour co-host Aisha Harris. This episode of It's Been a Minute was produced by
Alexis Williams.
This episode was edited by
Nina Patak.
Our supervising producer is
Barton Girdwood.
Our executive producer is
Verilyn Williams.
Our VP of programming is
Yolanda Sanguini.
All right, that's all for this episode of It's Been a Minute from NPR. I'm Brittany Luce. Talk soon.
Support for NPR and the following message come from Boll and Branch. Change your sleep with the softness of Boll & Branch's 100% organic cotton sheets. Feel the difference with 15% off your first set of sheets at bollandbranch.com with code NPR. Exclusions apply. See site for details. This message comes from Bombas. Their socks are super plush, designed to support your arches and support people in need. One purchase equals one donated to those experiencing homelessness. Go to bombas.com/NPR and use code NPR for 20% off your first order.
This message comes from EasyCater, committed to helping organizations order and manage food for all their business needs. With search tools to help accommodate dietary preferences and stay on budget, plus flexible payment by credit card or invoicing. EasyCater also offers employee lunch programs, tools to see and control food spend, and 24/7 live customer support, all on one platform. Learn more at easycater.com.